I think I mean, that is a good point. It kind of brings us to kind of art in our lives as, we are there's an experiential component in our life as a citizen that you participate in different artistic activities, whether it's visiting a museum, going to a concert, or being the consumer of specific local art, or really intentionally connecting with communities that through the art can thrive and can continue to earn a living through their craft. And that's something that you have to be very intentional about, either as to distribute that art, but also as a consumer to be conscious of maybe realizing that when you are purchasing a product that is made by an artisan, well, you are helping not only maintain that craft, but helping that artisan earn a living. And that's part of having art in our lives. And the same goes, I think, around tourism, right? When we visit, it's very interesting that art attracts businesses, it attracts also people, and there's a whole cultural tourism. Is the UNESCO defines it as the movement of persons for essentially cultural motivations, whether it's study tour, performing arts, visiting a craft, as you mentioned, learning craft, studying nature, folklore, participating in pilgrimages. That type of tourism is an important part of tourism. And I think in the U.S., we found that 75% of American leisure travelers have participated in cultural activities while traveling, and over 25% have extended a trip to participate in a cultural, art, heritage, or historic activity or an event. So it's really part of what we do, and we have to be conscious of it. And I think it brings us a little bit, and you touched on this, with how the creative economy functions. You talked about the creators. There's the creators, there's the distributors in your example, that store, and then there's also the buyers. And there's something interesting about the creators. And in the brief, we highlight here how when people think about the industrialization in the second half of the 19th century, most really don't think about the art. But the wealth that spread throughout society and expanded the middle class also stimulated the art market, because people had more time to devote to the art, meaning creators also had a broader field to work with when they were trying to understand what was meaningful to consumers and how to create meaningful art out of the available resources. So it's kind of interesting how a more open, expanded market makes possible, makes possible forms of creative individuality that we haven't really seen before in history. And the greater the size of the market, the greater the number of artistic forms that creators can earn a living from. And I think this is what technology brings today, is that you can have the market can really be the world. It can extend much beyond your own town. You can sell your product across states, across nations, and it allows more and more artists to earn a really decent living through their art. I can just think of a number of sites such as Etsy, and there's arts.com. There's several sites that allow for just distribution of art. Perhaps you can share some thoughts here around the creative process and also this access to a bigger market.
Well, also I want to, as you were mentioning some of these platforms and sites, I just wanted to note that, when thinking about the creative economy, we do better to look at, especially, and a lot of times things that we're talking about that, affects art, our artistry, what we're really talking about, and we can only talk about it a bit of it at a time, different seconds at a time. We're really talking about what affects usually the hyper-local creative economy, not necessarily, the artists who are, selling, $24 million paintings, et cetera, et cetera. You're talking about, everyday arts workers, the middle market creative economy, artists that both maybe work, a group of them that are working full time, but then also when it comes to visual or performance art, a lot of artists that are working part-time, but still possibly in the same economy. So you have a lot of performers who are also, instructors, musicians that are music instructors, etc. And that is a part of the creative economy as well. One thing I want to note is that, a lot of people, when they're talking about resources, to artists and things like that, to me, it's okay and great for us to share information about, how they can how we as artists and creators can be more sustainable, how we can look at financial models, how to do our taxes, so forth and so on. Do you want to have an LLC? All of that is great. But it's not just about teaching financial literacy and things like that to artists, or sharing platforms in which they could sell their items. It's really about making sure that they're supported on a base level as creatives in the community, in their state, in their country, so that they have the best set of options possible as they're making these decisions. It's everyone that's in debt was not terrible with money. Every artist you have artists that I know several who had almost a full year of a tour booked, or was in the process of debuting their first album and had invested in it, and, so forth and so on. And the next thing you know, your income for the entire year is gone, So it's not just about right now. I mean, we're talking about the creative economy at a very different time. I feel like we're just turning the corner, as things are becoming a bit safer in different areas in the country that are being responsible, and, et cetera, et cetera. But it's going to be more than artists and us supporting as patrons, as philanthropists, et cetera. More is both and. Yes, support the Etsy's. Yes, support the pop-ups and, the stream performances and the donations and all of those things. Support them all now without question. But alongside that, it's extremely important for individuals, especially those who may not be directly connected to philanthropy, to find out, what your company's, donation policies are. Are you able to, is your company or your organization giving any portion of anything or support to creatives or to spaces? If you own a marketing agency or you work at a firm, are they able to donate hours or anything to support a local venue that's struggling, that needs to figure out how to do streaming performances so they can keep their doors open for the time being, different things like that. So I think it's, both that direct support, those immediate injections, those cash injections, and things like that. But then it's also about looking at the ecosystem in which artists and creatives and creative institutions and businesses are having to adjust now, and allowing space for people, or recognizing that there needs to be more support allocated to those areas for people to actually take advantage of platforms that are available to them to generate income. Because ultimately, what I'll say is that some people and creatives and creative businesses, et cetera, are fully aware of all of these platforms and opportunities that exist. But it's how are they going to manage all of these things, while trying to keep their doors open, while they're trying to create, and not to mention their people, there are people too who are dealing with some of the same traumas and burnout that every other person, particularly in the United States, is dealing with as well. So I want to make sure that I brought that to the front.